tears aren't coming. The tears just aren't coming.
Okay.
Just to be clear, it looks like he's dead or he is dead.
It just looks like he's dead. He's got, like, blue paint on him or something. But he's going to be fine.
What is wrong with you?
Doctor!
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. And yesterday we went over some of the new information we had about Marvel Comics. And today we're going to cover DC Comics, which hasn't been nearly as quiet as Marvel. We've been hearing about Joker War. We've been hearing about Dark Knight's death metal. We've been hearing about Batman 3 Jokers. And finally, we're getting solicitation information for DC Comics. And we have a slew of new information. I've seen articles about Josh Williamson leaving Flash soon. I've seen articles about Harley Quinn ending. I've seen articles about Supergirl and the Terrifics finishing up their runs on digital only. Strangely enough, I haven't seen an article what I thought was maybe the biggest news. Sue Taconic is no longer writing Aquaman. The solicitation information for Aquaman 62 no longer identifies Sue Taconic as the writer. It is now going to be Jordan Clark. And I basically had that confirmed that she's no longer on the series, but we're not sure how long Jordan Clark is going to be on the series. Is it temporary? Is it a permanent move? I'm going to bring Perch from Comics by Perch on the channel here very shortly, and we're going to discuss this as well as the other big announcements from DC Comics. A little bit of information about Jordan Clark. If you haven't heard about him, don't feel bad because he's only got 4 writing credits that I can find, and they aren't all that promising because he might not be a big change from what Sue Taconic was doing prior. 2 of his writing credits are on Bitch Planet, and his most recent writing credit was on DC Comics Crime of Passion, their Valentine's Day special that they had. So that is the big news in my mind. Sue Taconic is off Aquaman, but we do have new information. Joshua Williamson moving off of Flash. Harley Quinn series being canceled. Supergirl, the Terrifics, moving to digital, being canceled. And then I also have some information about Scott Snyder and Jeff Johns and their plans moving forward with DC Comics. So you're not going to want to miss that. So now let's bring Perch onto the channel and talk about all this DC Comics news. So yesterday we talked a little bit about Marvel Comics and their announcements. Now it's time to get back on the DC train because they were also had a bunch of announcements that hit the news. First off, we got the solicitations out from all the way to August, and there's a big name missing, and that's Sue Taconic on Aquaman. Dan Abnett set that series up pretty good for her as far as sales and everything, but it just never felt like, the audience was there waiting for a Sue Taconic Aquaman, even though the story wasn't really that bad.
Yeah, I think it is kind of wrong creator, wrong time in some cases. I think that Sue Taconic, as we saw with Captain Marvel when she was on that title, she tends to do these introspective comics, and there's a place for them. There's a moment where that's really helpful to the character. But you remember, Aquaman was coming off of a pretty dynamic run. They were elevating him within DC, and he had this movie that surprised people by doing very well. And the movie was action. It was a movie of him, stuff blowing up, and Black Manta there, and I mean, it was a movie with a lot of adrenaline and a lot of action. And so the idea that we come into Sue's run and immediately we're going to be dealing with the pregnancy of Mara, and he's isolated to an island, he has amnesia, and it's more of an inward look to himself. It took him out of all the elements that the moviegoers were excited to see. So not that people go watch the movie and immediately flock to the comics, but there is this connection. If you're building up somebody as a badass on the movie, you're going to want the comic to reflect that to some extent, to see those bigger than life heroic adventures. And that just wasn't what she delivered with Aquaman. And I think the sales, responded accordingly.
So what's the word on the replacement? Is Jordan like a permanent fixture on Aquaman, or is this just a fill-in writer until they get a new person for Aquaman moving forward?
I've heard that all these writers are fill-in writers until we get to the end of Death Metal and G5, and we get some larger shuffling of the characters. I think that, from what I'm hearing, all these creators are temporary.
Okay, so let's talk about G5. I've heard that it was being scaled down and that Scott Snyder had a bigger hand in the creative process and had changed the ending to kind of propel DC Comics forward for what they wanted to do after G5. But there's all these rumors right now that Generation 5 is just canceled, period.
Yeah, no, it's not canceled, period, but it is. I mean, it's what it is. And I think we've been on this channel talking about it a bunch. And remember that a lot of people's views of what 5G at the time, as they were calling it, was shaped was from Bleeding Cool. And they came out with a story about all the comics are going to get canceled. It's going to be new characters. It's going to be the new generational, highly diverse set of new DC heroes. And that was never completely accurate. You talk to all people at DC, they would deny that was never what was actually going to happen. But that remains. That's what's stuck in a lot of people's heads, because there are a lot of videos made, a lot of responses, a lot of outrage and everything about this plan that wasn't ever really the plan. So now we're left with what has changed. Well, clearly they have scaled some things back. Death Metal has gotten larger. I think this was some friction, at least, between Snyder and Didio that has now been resolved with Didio gone. And so I think a lot of the elements of what is the future of DC, I think G5 was going to do two things. First, it was going to look at the different generations of DC Comics, something they still plan to do, although those issues haven't been solicited again yet. And this is just more of a historical kind of the history of the Marvel Universe DC style that was going to happen. And then you're going to get this kind of future storyline. And we've described it as an Age of Apocalypse style, what if the world looked this way, as a bit of a breather between Death Metal and whatever was going to come next. Now, we don't know exactly the shape of what that's going to take. I'd heard it was going to be a interruption series, and I've also heard it was going to impact maybe 40% of the comics and a crossover storyline, similar to Ten of Swords and everything else. Which will it be? I don't know. If I'm guessing, it's probably the latter. But definitely it's been scaled back. I think DC is definitely looking at this and going, they want to try some new things. They definitely want to hint at the future of DC and what these heroes can be. And it's smart that they do that, but they're not going to capitalize capsize their current characters and do that. They're not going to remove Batman and Superman entirely and go several months without their core characters right as their parent is trying to get some synergy going.
So there's more DC news we have to talk about. Josh Williamson has done a fantastic job on Flash ever since Rebirth. He's coming up on his 100th issue. Obviously, they changed the Flash numbering to go back with legacy numbering at 750 for that Milestone issue. But, he's right now, he's in Flash Age, and he's got his final story arc ready to go, and then he's going to be off the series. Are they rebooting Flash after that? Are they going back to a number one? Or is he just moving on to another series? And, what is your retrospective on what Williamson has done with the Flash?
I think Williamson's had a great run with the Flash. I think this is one of those books that we're going to look back years from now and say he actually did quite a bit. It was a good classic run, and in some cases got hidden, I think. Not every storyline hit, but he had a good grasp on the character. I think he knew what was at the heart of the Flash. He had some good villains going on. He did a solid job of that, and especially in comparison if we were just talking about with Aquaman and others. He kept the core of the Flash alive with both the character and then tie-ins from the TV show and other things. He kept the spirit all the same. From what I understand, he is moving on to another title that he's excited about, which is great. We're curious to see what that is. He's going to be continuing to write for DC, so that's good to know as well. So where he goes,
I'm hoping for Green Lantern.
I'm hoping for Green Lantern. I think Green Lantern would be great for him. Absolutely, I think that would be a natural fit. I don't know that. So the number one is an interesting one. With all the effort that DC has put to the 1,000 issues and everything else, I do think they've reconciled their legacy. It doesn't seem to hold them back. They don't seem to have the same kind of concerns Marvel does, that if the number gets too high, people will forget how to count. So I don't know that they're going to go through and reboot all these books and issue them as new number ones, but they might. We'll see what emerges out of Death Metal. But hopefully, we'll get a new creator on there. We'll get a new status quo for the Flash, and the next creator can do as solid as a job as Williamson did.
There's actually another cancellation. It looks like Harley Quinn's run as a DC series is coming to an end. A lot of people like the character. She's obviously very popular. I don't think the quality of the comic book probably lived up to the popularity of the character, or certainly hasn't for a couple of years now. Not the worst thing to see that series kind of go away, and maybe I'm certain they'll reboot it somewhat soon.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's going to be rebooted within the next 2-3 months, either in the midst of Death Metal or immediately following it. We've heard from a couple people at DC about some of the plans in the future. There's this whole drama about Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn and not having the two collide in the future or in the past for that matter. But we'll see where it all goes. It's like, to me, Harley Quinn behaves and acts a lot like Deadpool in terms of they feel very comfortable kind of rebooting the book and starting with a new creative team, and it's just always going to be around as one of these auxiliary characters. But that, which, by the way, this gives me some pause that we're going to see a bunch of new number ones. I know what I just said. Hopefully not, but the fact that they are canceling Harley Quinn and she is going to get reissued with a new series does make me worry a little bit that they're going to do that with all the comics, and I hope they don't.
It's kind of strange. She's a big name character. Obviously, the Harley Quinn is very important to the DCEU as far as Warner Brothers are concerned. They've never really put like a top flight writer on that series, at least not for quite a while. Do you think there's going to be renewed emphasis and maybe going out there and finding maybe the cream of the crop, or maybe an A-tier writer to maybe help rejuvenate the character as far as the comics are concerned?
I honestly don't. I think that Harley Quinn, the appeal to the character and how they kind of want to steer it is just like Deadpool. It's zany comedy. I think that they don't believe they need to put a top level writer on there. I think there's a lot more at risk with the Supermans and Batmans and Flashes and Green Lanterns of the world. So I think it's more can we get somebody who can kind of get the humor of Harley Quinn and have her in kind of forgettable throwaway adventures over time. Harley Quinn with the death of her mother and the cancer storyline, all the rest of this stuff got maybe a little bit too heavy for what DC was looking for. I mean, they really just wanted off-ball comedy. And if you look over at Marvel with Deadpool, you had Scardy Young come in, you have Kelly Thompson there. It's going to be a revolving. Gary Duggan, of course, did a long run on it. It's going to be a revolving door of writers on that book for a while, as they just kind of have her do her adventures.
We have a couple of more cancellations we need to talk about. So DC is borrowing from the Marvel playbook, and they're going to end 2 series on digital only. So supporters of Supergirl that have been with the run since Rebirth or since it relaunched at #1 aren't going to get to see it finished in floppies, and they're going to have incomplete runs, as well as the Terrifics. Of course, that launched out of Dark Knight's Metal. It was one of the New Age of Heroes books. It was probably the best New Age of Heroes books, and it's the last remnants of that. And they're both ending, on digital rather than physical. I don't like that decision, but probably 2 titles that they just didn't have the numbers to keep around, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm disappointed by that decision. I think people should finish what they start, but I mean, it's a company and they're out to make money. So obviously there's a financial decision that got made there, and this is what makes the most sense for them financially. But I think it's this close to the end. Just end it. I mean, just get the comics out there, let the collectors have their complete runs. The fact that it kind of goes over to digital is almost as an afterthought. It really does indicate how the company viewed those titles and what they were seeing in terms of the numbers, that they did not believe it was important enough to risk isolating some of the fans.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but I do think it's smart that Marvel and DC are trimming the line down, finishing up some runs that just don't have the readership, and moving forward, hopefully with a healthier comic book line that's easier on readers. Now, we do have a little bit more information about Scott Snyder. We already talked about him a little bit, but we knew that he said after Dark Knight's Death Metal that he was done with superheroes for a while. He was going to go concentrate some on some of his creator-owned work, maybe, and go back to his horror roots. It kind of looked a little fishy that he was kind of taking the creative control, creative reins at DC, and really taking a leadership role. And it turns out he's not leaving superheroes, at least not immediately, and he's going to play a bigger role in DC after Dark Knight's Death Metal. Sounds like after DC 5G, and he might be doing another Dick Grayson as Batman story. This is great news. Yeah.
I think it's hard to predict. I mean, I think when months from now we'll look back at this and kind of be able to piece together what Snyder was saying. I think that he's stepping into almost more of an architect role. It may be not completely unlike what Hickman has done with X-Men. I mean, I know both companies have looked a lot at how that worked, and this idea of having almost a showrunner, for lack of a better word, in comics, and having a guy come in and kind of curate some talent and find writers that they like. You see that being done a little bit with Sean Gordon Murphy and his Murphyverse. It is. I think that approach is being seen to have some merit. You get a creator who really seems to understand the title, seems to have some credibility with the fans, and who bring people in. that they can step into almost an editorial or a shepherd type role, help do some of these stories, help get some other people, give kind of the fans a boost to say, hey, this has my stamp of approval on here. You should come look at it. And then that writer gets to be a bit of an architect, which Snyder seems to want to do. So yeah, you're right. But beyond that, it does look like he's going to be doing at least some other books. And so I'm curious what that looks like.
Speaking of a big name writer kind of stepping into more of a curator role, we know 2 years ago, Jeff Johns said that he was having his like Killing Zone imprint was going to be launched. That was right at the same time we heard about Wonder Comics and another imprint. I can't remember which one it was, but we haven't really heard anything since. But he was recently on a panel talking about his work on the Arrowverse. He got asked about it, and I guess the Killing Zone is still happening. It's described as something along the lines of a pop-up series or a pop-up imprint, kind of like Gerard Way's Young Animal on DC Black Label, to where it'll be a smaller label, more obscure heroes, but it'll be Jeff Johns writing some of it. He's just waiting on an artist to become available, and we'll have other people coming in as well, but he'll be overseeing it.
Yeah, it'll be curious to see where Jeff Johns goes. I mean, I think his time is probably in very high demand at DC right now, and Time Warner in general. So I'm a little bit more than not hold my breath for that. He tends to overextend himself a little bit, and I think if push comes to shove, he probably has priorities beyond comics that are going to get assigned to him. That said, it's good to know that it's still out there, and that I think that, again, this model of being able to be more of a curator, find writers and talent that kind of fit with your mentality. It worked well for Sean Gordon Murphy. I think it's worked well for Jonathan Hickman to maybe lesser extent, but it is an approach that can work. And if Jeff Johns is going to take the same thing to get some of his long kind of awaited ideas off the ground, that would be great.
Like I said, lots of more information about DC Comics. We've been talking about DC for a couple weeks now. Seems like every 2 days or so, there's a new release of information. It all sounds good. Of course, they're trimming the line a little bit. We are getting a new writer on Aquaman. Sounds like we're getting a new creator on Flash, but Josh Williamson's going to find a new project moving forward. Hopefully, Scott Snyder gets to do Dick Grayson as Batman again, because Black Mirror is one of the better Batman stories in recent memory. And, it's all really exciting. Hopefully, more great news from DC coming in the next few days.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where it all goes.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.